There's a kind of calm that settles over you when you arrive in Shepshed. It's the sort of town that feels like it's caught in between two worlds, neither fully rural nor fully urban, but balanced somewhere in the middle, holding on to fragments of both. The air in May is cool, not quite the warm embrace of summer, but enough to tease the feeling of it. The kind of weather where the sun flirts with the clouds all day long, casting fleeting moments of brightness before slipping behind the grey. Shepshed's history feels as interwoven into its present as the name suggests. Originally known as Sheep's Head, before linguistic evolution softened it into Shepshed, this town has its roots firmly in agriculture, particularly in sheep farming. I imagined those distant days when the rolling fields would have been dotted with sheep grazing, and the town itself would have been built around this quiet pastoral life. Even today, there's still something rural in the air, though the sheep have long been replaced by modern homes and industries. The first thing I noticed, wandering through the streets, was that Shepshed feels both large and small at the same time. It's a big town by name and by the number of people, but somehow it still has that little bit of rural edge that makes it feel less busy than places like nearby Loughborough. The contrast with Loughborough is striking, really. Just a 15-minute drive away, Loughborough hums with the energy of its university, the vibrancy of students spilling out of coffee shops, and the town's historic market drawing in shoppers. Shepshed, by comparison, is quieter, more reserved. You don't feel that same buzz of excitement. It's a place where you come to slow down, and perhaps not much more. The high street is modest, lined with small shops that seem to cater primarily to the locals. You won't find the big-name brands or chain stores that dominate Loughborough, but there's a charm in the independent shops. Bakeries with the scent of fresh bread wafting out, little hardware stores that feel like stepping back in time, and the occasional charity shop, its windows full of the odds and ends of forgotten homes. I wandered into a local cafe, ordered a cup of tea, and watched as the day passed at its own slow pace. People in Shepshed seem to carry that same pace with them. They're friendly, but in a reserved way, not in the bustling, enthusiastic manner you might find in more touristy places. There's a politeness in the air, the kind where people give you a nod of acknowledgement but don't intrude on your space. As I sat in the cafe, I overheard locals discussing the town's affairs, small things mostly, like the local football club or the goings-on at one of the churches. It struck me that, for many, life in Shepshed is stable, dependable, unchanging in the best of ways. In terms of economic activity, Shepshed has moved far from its agricultural roots. It once relied heavily on the wool trade, back when sheep farming dominated the local landscape. But as with many English towns, the Industrial Revolution changed that. A few factories cropped up, and though Shepshed was never a manufacturing powerhouse, it did have its moments in the hosiery and textile industries. Today, much of its economy is tied to the logistics and transport sector, given its location near the M1 motorway. It's not glamorous work, but it's steady, and it keeps the town moving. There's a certain practicality to Shepshed. This isn't a place that chases trends or fads. People here work hard, and they value the stability that comes from industries that support the broader region. Yet, For all the history, the pleasant people, and the undeniable quietude, I found myself feeling something I hadn't quite expected, a sense of detachment. Shepshed is lovely in its own way, but it doesn't inspire that same spark in me that other towns do. I've always been drawn to places with a certain energy, a vibrancy that stirs something deep within. Loughborough has that, with its student life and bustling market squares. Even smaller rural villages in the Cotswolds or seaside towns like Whitstable seem to hum with a life that makes you want to linger just a little longer. But in Shepshed I found myself appreciating it from a distance. It's a town that's content to be itself without trying too hard to impress. And maybe that's the charm for some people. But for me it felt like a place I'd pass through rather than stay. There's no drama to Shepshed, no pressing reason to stay once you've seen the essentials. It's steady, solid, but perhaps a little too predictable for my taste. By the time I left Shepshed, the May clouds had started to gather more insistently, bringing a slight chill to the air. The town's unassuming charm had left an impression on me, though not the kind that makes you ache to return. Instead, it felt like a quiet chapter in a travelogue filled with more colorful destinations, a necessary pause before moving on to places that speak more vividly to my restless soul. Still, I respected Shepshed for what it was, a place grounded in its past, shaped by practicality, and content in its own quiet way. It may not call me back the way others have, but I can see why some people are perfectly happy to call it home.